Suppose we are live. Let me add myself to the podcast, to the show. That would be a good idea, right? Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live All Dolphins podcast episode for Sunday, September 15th, 2024. 3 nights after the Dolphins suffered their depressing, disheartening 31-10 loss against the Buffalo Bills, and still dealing with the ramifications of the injury sustained by quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Where we go from here, particularly after the Dolphins not only lost a quarterback for who knows how long. Dolphins again came up woefully, and I mean woefully short against a quality opponent. What is it now? 1-12 in their last 13 games against teams that made the playoffs, assuming the Bills are going to make the playoffs in 2024. We can't count Jacksonville. Maybe we'll be able to add Jacksonville as a win in this category of games before the end of the year. But right now, Jacksonville is 0-2. Certainly not looking like a playoff team. And if we're looking at the upcoming Dolphin opponents, the team they're facing next week in Seattle, the Seahawks, now 2-0 after their overtime win against the New England Patriots, who the Dolphins face in week 5, and who certainly don't look like the pushover that everybody thought they were going to be entering the season, because they play pretty good defense. Their offense is rather unspectacular, but they can run the ball. And they pulled off the upset against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1, had a chance to win this game before losing in overtime 23-20. The week 4 opponents are the Tennessee Titans, who are 0-2. And we keep seeing Will Levis, who looked so good for Tennessee in the Monday night game against the Dolphins last December, keep showing off the big arm to make some big plays, also making some head-scratching decisions. He had another one today where he's in the process of getting sacked and tried a lateral instead of taking the sack when the Titans were in field goal range, wound up in a fumble that they just recovered to basically take 3 points off the board for the Titans. And then in week 6, it's the Colts, or after the bye, we should say the 6th game for the Dolphins is the bye. After that, it's the Colts, who are now 0-2 after losing against the Green Bay Packers, with Anthony Richardson struggling to get a whole lot going offensively for the Colts, beyond that one incredible highlight he had in the opener against the Houston Texans. Outside of that, the Colts really struggling. So, brings me to one of my major points here before we are going to start looking at some of the comments and have our usual chat with the viewers. And by the way, I have been remiss not to thanking everyone who is in here watching this. Thank you very much for joining me as we discuss and dissect what's going on with the Dolphins. And I bring up the next 4 opponents against Seattle, Tennessee, at New England, bye at Indianapolis, to make the point that, as I wrote on Miami Dolphins on SI today, it's MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com, or the URL you see below my name here, SI.com/NFL/Dolphins. This notion that the Dolphins automatically are going to lose every game that Skylar Thompson has to start, to me, is offensive. It's kind of ridiculous. Having said that, no, I'm not necessarily a huge Skylar Thompson fan. I wasn't necessarily on board with taking him as a number 2 quarterback over Mike White. Having said all that, it's not like all of a sudden the entire Dolphins team was all about Tua Tagovailoa. He's the one who makes the offense run as smoothly as it does. Sure, the big playmakers on that offense remain Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane. And this notion that if Skylar Thompson were to be the quarterback for over the full season, the Dolphins would go 1-17, again, to me, is ridiculous. And as I wrote, this is where the guys who got paid this summer, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Ramsey, along with the other big names on this team, whether it be Jalen Phillips, whether it be Javon Holland, whether it be Calais Campbell, have to step up and come up and make some plays. Now, I look at those next 4 opponents. Seattle can be tricky, but is Seattle a juggernaut? No, they're 2-0, but they beat Denver, which is a really bad team. Sorry. It's a bad team. And as I put out on Twitter, I'm old enough to remember when Bo Nix was supposed to tear up the NFL. again, this is always, especially with rookie quarterbacks, don't go crazy over what's happening in the preseason because defenses don't show anything. Regular season arrives, it's a whole bunch of different packages, disguises in coverage, disguises in blitz packages, and all of a sudden they start messing with the young quarterbacks' minds. That's what we see happening with Bo Nix. And besides that, the team around him just not very good on offense. The offensive line is whatever. There's not one stud wide receiver now that they traded Jerry Jeudy to the Cleveland Browns. So it's a mediocre team, and Bo Nix is showing you he's a rookie quarterback who it may have a very good career, but it's not going to light the NFL on fire right from the start. So, and then Seattle also beat New England, which, as I said before, again, is not going to be the pushover everybody thought they were going to be, but it still cannot be classified as a great team. So you have Seattle. The week after that is Tennessee. Well, you can count on Will Levis to give you one or two, knuckle-headed turnovers. And Tennessee doesn't have Derrick Henry anymore in the running game to take the load away from Levis. It's Tony Pollard, who's a good back, but he's not Derrick Henry. So are we really going to say that's a game the Dolphins can't win with Skylar Thompson, their quarterback? Sorry, again, not on board with that. And then week 5 is at New England. Is it going to be tricky? Yeah, it's going to be tricky. New England's going to be tough on defense. Absolutely. And then after the bye, it's Indianapolis, which is having all sorts of problems. And again, this is assuming this is the next 4 games, and I mentioned the next 4 games because that's the minimum number of games that Tua Tagovailoa would have to sit out if the Dolphins make the decision for him to be placed on IR, which brings us to our next point with Tua Tagovailoa. The report from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network on Sunday morning that he has no plans to retire. He is going to meet with some neurologists to discuss what's going on with his current concussion. Of course, all of the cumulative effects of the concussions he's had before, which started with a concussion at Alabama on the play where he also suffered the hip injury. We had the 2 diagnosed concussions in 2022, plus another play where he hit his head on the grass at Hard Rock Stadium against Buffalo 4 days before the big concussion against Cincinnati, which was not officially diagnosed as a concussion, but again, there was head contact. So Tua's going to gather information. I think what we need to accept here is it may be a while before there's any kind of determination made as to any moves as far as putting Tua on IR. All indication, again, based on the Rappaport report, how's that for a rhyme? The Rappaport report is that he's going to continue playing. When he would be back, who knows? This is why I mentioned if he does go on IR, it's just 4 games that he has to miss, and those 4 games, again, are absolutely winnable games, even with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. The idea of going out and getting a big, quote-unquote, big-name quarterback or even somebody to come in as a starter to replace Skylar Thompson after Mike McDaniel told us on Friday morning that Skylar Thompson is next man up, all along was going to be done, to me, only in the sense where Tua's absence is going to be extended. If that's the case, then I think all bets are off and the Dolphins now look for somebody who's an upgrade over Skylar Thompson. If Skylar Thompson is going to be a placeholder until Tua comes back for a shorter rather than longer period of time, then I think what the Dolphins are going to do is they're going to look for a backup for Skylar Thompson, who's an upgrade over Tim Boyle, who's currently in the practice squad, because quite frankly, Tim Boyle's resume is not exactly confidence-inspiring. On the NBC pregame show, Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, was an insider for that NBC pregame show, threw out that C.J. Beathard, former 49ers Jacksonville backup quarterback, is on the short list of names that the Dolphins would consider to bring in as a backup for Skylar Thompson, and that's the kind of player I would expect the Dolphins to bring in. I mentioned one possibility being Mike White, bringing him back as a backup. And for those who would question why Mike White would want to do that after the Dolphins dumped him, well, because the salary he would make on the Dolphins active roster is going to be a lot better than what he's making on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. So that would be one reason that he would want to do it. I think this is the kind of player we're looking at. Ryan Tannehill, as Mike Florio mentioned, is not looking to come in to be somebody's emergency temporary starter. He wants to go somewhere where he could be a starter for the remainder of the season. Whether that happens in Miami or anywhere else for him remains to be seen. Not convinced personally, but I don't know that he wants to come in for, again, whatever, 2, 3, 4 weeks to serve as an emergency temporary fill-in. And there's also the issue of how quickly could he get adjusted and how quickly could the Dolphins tweak their playbook and their scheme to fit what Ryan Tannehill does best, which is not what Tua Tagovailoa does best. The skill sets are completely different. So that's where we stand as far as that's concerned. The Dolphins are going to be back at practice on Monday. They had the weekend off, their quote-unquote mini bye after the Thursday night game. It'd be interesting to see. I would not expect to see Teron Armstead out there, judging by the quote from Mike McDaniel of we're hoping to see him sooner rather than later, which certainly indicates that there's some issue there in terms of his availability for the game against Seattle next Sunday. But that's something we will have to wait and see. With that, let me jump to the comments here, see what we got going on here. And we will start off with Don Shula 73. Thank you for the contribution. Much appreciated. Putting Tua and Tyreek aside, Greer decided to pay Ramsey, Campbell, and OBJ. Christian Wilkins appears to be ascending. Ramsey and OBJ are heading in the other direction. This is on Greer. Yeah, here's where I go with this, though. This is all about positional priorities and the Dolphins not feeling that paying the kind of money that Christian Wilkins got from the Raiders was justified. And you can make an argument one way or another about that. It would have been nice to be able to retain Christian Wilkins, who was absolutely a difference maker in the middle of that defensive line, even though I'll maintain the Dolphin defense wasn't terrible against Buffalo. They gave up about 247 yards in the total. The run defense was excellent except for one play, which was a very poor play with a missed assignment by David Long Jr., who took the wrong gap, and then Jordan Poyer, who took a bad angle toward the line of scrimmage and allowed James Cook to race by him. Outside of that, you look at Buffalo's numbers, it's like 58 yards on like something like 20 carries or something ridiculous like that. So the run defense wasn't good. Now the push up the middle in pass rush situations certainly isn't there. You don't have the tandem of Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins creating problems for opposing defenses, both of them together up the middle. And absolutely that's an issue, and that's something the Dolphins miss. And yeah, no, there's certainly some validity in what you're saying. But again, this comes down to positional value, and the Dolphins just did not want to spend that kind of money on a defensive tackle, nor did they want to do it for a guard. And that one is even more difficult to argue against, especially when we see how putrid the Carolina Panthers offense is, even though they have their $20 million guard in Robert Hunt. So, but those are always the decisions you have to make. My feeling on the whole thing of handing extensions to everybody and their mother pretty much seemed like every big player over the summer was like, and especially for the guys who had years left on their contract, was like, what's the hurry on a team that has yet to accomplish anything of major significance, i.e. win a playoff game? That's a different conversation. So let's examine some of the other comments here. We'll go from the top. Yeah, I don't know. Some of the discussion before I actually started this was about Joe Burrow and the Bengals game. Do we really, the Bengals-Chiefs game, do we really think that Joe Burrow lost that game? Come on. And as somebody who suffers from a bad case of CFS, for those not familiar, that's Chiefs fatigue syndrome. Hated to see that flag. Hated that play by the DB. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to go through a receiver to play the ball. You have as much right to the ball as the receiver. You're not allowed to go through the receiver to get to play the ball, though. And that, to me, as much as I wanted to bitch and moan about the call and how the refs keep favoring the Chiefs, that's a good call. I mean, I hate it, but it's a good call. And this is the Chiefs again, just finding it is. I'm getting nasty Patriots / Brady flashbacks of them, even when they're not playing their best and they have games where they don't deserve to win. They always find a way to win. This was one like that. And look at their two games. How easily could they have lost against Baltimore? It's a matter of the guys a tenth of Isaiah Likely's foot touching the back of the end zone, and the Ravens go for two, and maybe they win, and Kansas City's 0-1. And then today, again, it does help. They have a lot of things going for them, and one of them that shouldn't go unnoticed or unspoken is they do have right now maybe the best kicker in the NFL in Harrison Butker. The guy's completely money, and of course, when he lines up for a 51-yard field goal at the end of the game, you kind of know he's going to make it. So, Mario, hey Mario, how are you? Thanks for the contribution. With the issues at receiver aside from Hill and Waddle, do you see Easy finally getting a chance to start? Whoa, start. No. You. Hell, it'd be good for him right now if you just got elevated from the practice squad for a game. I'm always baffled by this guy. I'll be honest with you. I don't know, maybe it's my untrained eye. When I see him on the field, he's got something to him that I think could be a factor and could make an impact for the offense. The Dolphin coaches very obviously don't share that feeling because he didn't make the 53. And I think the fact he doesn't play special teams played a role in that. And then you see the Dolphins have a need for a third wide receiver in each of the first two games, and they elevate Robbie Chosen. So I don't know. And I know the first year, the issue with, and when he was a rookie, the issue with Eric Ezukama was, and like being completely knowledgeable about the playbook. If that's the case 2 years down the road, then there's a problem. And this is a guy who would never make an impact. But there is something there in terms of skill set. And I'm curious as to why it never goes on, Here we go. Depressing is right. Pound that like. There you go. Mitchell Young, pound that like button, you all. Thank you, Mitchell. Yes, absolutely. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're at 14.3. I'd like to reach 15,000 soon. So please spread the word. Johnny Rodden, how are you, Johnny? I would think we draft a QB now in the early rounds, correct? Tua forever a liability. If Tua comes back, as again now is seems to be the word, and there are no further issues in 2024, what makes us think the Dolphins are going to go ahead and draft a quarterback? They clearly have made the commitment to Tua as a franchise quarterback with the contract they gave him. This is not an organization that historically, and a lot of it should be said that a lot of teams are like that's going to bring in somebody. For example, what the Atlanta Falcons did this April, or was it May when the draft was, when they drafted Michael Penix Jr., 6 weeks or whatever it was after signing Kirk Cousins to a big free agent contract. Dolphins don't operate that way. So I would be very surprised. And myself and former All Dolphins podcast co-host Omar Kelly, now with the Miami Herald, both were kind of advocating for Hendon Hooker from Tennessee when he was coming out last year, because his stock had dropped a little bit because of the injury he had in his final year at Tennessee. And this is a guy who had massive, massive upside, loads of talent. The Dolphins could have had him in the second round. They chose somebody else instead. The Lions took him early in the third round before the Dolphins picked Devon Achane, so didn't have a shot at him in the third round. And now he's the backup quarterback. And now there is a national columnist, Matt Lombardo, who has suggested the Dolphins make a phone call to the Lions to trade for Hendon Hooker. And of course, question is, why would the Lions do that when Hendon Hooker is their number 2 quarterback based on what they see of him and his skill set, and they like him. And on top of that, he's on his rookie contract and he's very cheap, which is great for them since they have a very highly paid starter in Jared Goff. So Dolphins had their shot at Hendon Hooker. Instead, they took Cam Smith, who has played 20 defensive snaps for the Dolphins so far. He's on IR right now. We don't know yet if he's going to become a good NFL cornerback. But this was a time where the Dolphins could have easily justified the move to take Hendon Hooker, even if they were still on Tua, because if you have a stud quarterback, even as your second, it's an asset that the guy never plays for you, that if he shows enough and people around the league think enough of him, you can turn him around and trade him for a good return. So this, again, was a failed opportunity by the Dolphins, just like the argument can be made the Dolphins should have signed Jimmy Garoppolo as a backup this year to upgrade from Skylar Thompson and Mike White. instead of letting him sign with the LA Rams. And now Garoppolo is going to be back in action this week after serving his 2-game NFL suspension. And again, the idea of trading for him, because again, he's had a lot of success in this offense with the 49ers. Rams are going to want him as their backup. So if they're going to trade him, they're going to make the Dolphins pay for it. So that doesn't work anymore. Okay, Marco again. Hey, Marco. Do you believe after the Bills game we have bigger issues in quarterback? Going back to last year, this offense has been non-existent. What is going on? Oh, absolutely. The Dolphins have big issues. And the injury occurred late in the third quarter. Dolphins had 10 points. And the previous game, they had 20 against Jacksonville. The playoff game, they had 7. The game before that against Buffalo, they had 14. The game before that against Baltimore, they had 19. I mean, this offense has not been cranking. And again, some of it is playing quality opposition. Some of it is defense are figuring out. Let the Dolphins be very, very patient, have to move up and down the field very slowly. Of course, that didn't happen against Jacksonville because they let Hill and Waddle loose for 2 big plays. But the Dolphins, again, they're not a physical team. This is a finesse team, like it's always been. The offensive line is a problem. If the quick passes either get covered up or they're sniffed out or they're kind of stopped early on, Dolphins don't have many counter punches right now, and that's a problem. Yeah. And defensively, again, not only they played a bad game against Buffalo, the only problem, they didn't come up with a takeaway, they don't come up with a sack, and they also didn't respond when they were faced with a short field. So that's the other side. So when we evaluate the performance of the defense against Buffalo, it's, on the one hand, they only gave up 247 yards, but they didn't rise to the occasion to bail out the offense, which was needed on this particular night. So yes, no, there are problems. And to me, one of the most depressing things about the game Thursday, of course, I mean, obviously it's a concussion, but almost as much as that from a big picture type of view is the Dolphins, again, were put in a big boy game situation, and they just flat out didn't look like they were ready for the challenge. So, yeah, no, there are concerns right now. Jason Taylor, 9944. Thank you very much, Jason. Jason, is that JT? Okay, or even if it's not. Do you think the NFL will pull the springs to make sure Tua doesn't come back? The Tua injury status at the end of 2022 seemed very suspicious. No, I don't think the NFL would. First of all, they couldn't. If the guy wants to play and he's medically cleared, no, I don't. No, I'm not buying that. Could it be out there, come up as in discussion? Sure, but no, I don't believe that they would. They are going to make sure, as much as they can, get involved as that Tua gathers all the information that he needs to make the proper decision. Thank you very much, Offman Jared, because, Mike Florio on Football Night in America reported, short mails, and I say that, CJ Beathard, better than Tim Boyle, let's put it that way. He's not a threat to Skylar Thompson to start. He's better than Tim Boyle. Those are my thoughts on him. Or Brady, LOL. Brady is not coming unless it would be to start the rest of the season, number one. Number two, again, the odds of that, he would have to work out something with Fox, walking away from the booth temporarily, because he's not walking away from a 10-year, $375 million deal unless he has some assurances that the contract picks up when he comes back. But again, if it turned out that Tua's absence would be extended, I would never say never with Brady because he's such a competitor and all that. And also, if we're going to be honest about it, right now, I was watching the Red Zone today, so I got snippets of his calls and his analysis from the Dallas-New Orleans game. And let's just say he's got some work to do in the broadcast booth. Let's see what we got here. Okay, here we go. Hold on. William Berg, Dolphins are having real discussions internally to place Tua on season-ending IR. William, here's the deal. There is no such thing as season-ending IR once the regular season starts. Okay, the season-ending IR is anybody placed on IR before August 27th this year, which was the day of the cuts to 53. On that day, each team had a maximum of 2 players they could place on IR and designate to return. Once the regular season starts, you can do that. And including those 2, you have 8 designations of players to return from IR. So anybody who was on the initial 53, once you have not passed that limit, is eligible to return. So the Dolphins put 2 on IR. You're going to put him on IR, and he has to miss at least 4 games. And it could be 6, it could be 7, it could be the rest of the year. But the Dolphins, there is no such thing as a designation of season-ending IR once the regular season starts, unless you've reached a limit of 8 players already designated to return. So, sorry, I don't know where you got that from, but that's not accurate. Okay, I'm going to ignore all this Joe Burrow back and forth here. What do we got here? Michael Lombardo, you're a loyal dude, and I appreciate you. Just know that I very much appreciate you, bud. Great seeing you on Sunday. You're the best, my man. Much appreciated. Jeffrey Appleton, watch us be the number 1 running team in the NFL. If it works and it produces results, here's the thing. You don't have to have a high-flying offense passing the ball all over the place to have success. The Pittsburgh Steelers, whose offense is average at best, are 2-0. Because why? Because their defense won the games against Atlanta, against Denver. The Chargers have just been ground and pound. They're probably averaging like 200 yards, and they're playing good defense. Of course, they played Gardner Minshew and Bryce Young in the first 2 weeks. That helped. But to your point, Jeffrey, there's nothing wrong if that works. But then you have to avoid the mistakes that kill drives and avoid the turnovers, which is what kind of happened against Buffalo. De Hese, I don't know how you pronounce your name. Sorry. I actually feel confident he can go at least 3-3 or 4-3 while we wait for Tua's return. Yeah, I think it's and like I said, I'm not like I'm a huge Skylar Thompson fan, but this notion that the Dolphins are going 0-6 if he has to start 6 games, I think it's a little bit offensive to him and to the rest of the team. I mean, is that what we think of this team? Seriously. Marco again. Hey, Marco, thank you again. Final question. Thank you for answering. What's the best case scenario for timeline on Tua return? And what is the worst game? 4 games? Marco, I have less than 0 clue, and anybody who tells you they have a clue is completely lying to you until Tua meets with the neurologists, until the days pass, and then we see how his symptoms develop or progress. And this is the thing with concussions. No 2 concussions are the same. It's not like an ACL where it happens and you can tell pretty much right away. Okay, 6 to 7 months. Achilles tendon, that's 9 months. Sprained MCL, 4 to 6 weeks. With a concussion, could be a couple of weeks, could be 8 weeks, could be the whole year. We just don't know. I'd be lying to you. I'd be lying to you if I were to venture a guess, and anybody who's throwing out a guess right now is doing just that. And that's part of what Mike McDaniel was getting pissed off the other night, as politely as Mike McDaniel can get pissed off to like, dudes, I'm concerned about this guy's safety. I don't care about timelines. All I want is for him to get better whenever that happens. And that's the deal with concussions. Steven Jean-Baptiste. Oh, that's a loaded question here. Thank you for the contribution. What would you rate Tua ability-wise, 1 to 10? Wow, that's a loaded question here. 1 to 10. Seven. Is that fair? I think Tua is a good quarterback. I don't think he's elite. I think he's a perfect fit for the system. What he does well meshes with what McDaniel has done. Again, Mike McDaniel being very smart into building an offense that would take advantage of the skill position players he has and the speed and what they do best, and also marrying that to what Tua does best, which is accuracy, quick release. So, but in terms of ability, yes, there is ability there, but is he upper echelon? And we've had this discussion many, many times before, and my stance has been pretty consistent on it. Randy Rogers. Hey, Randy. Thank you very much, by the way. What can be done to motivate players who lack heart unless it's a contract year? You can't. If there's some players who are like that, no, that's tough. Curious as to whether you have somebody in mind here. I certainly haven't noticed. Lack of heart's a very, very strong accusation, and I don't know that I say that in the Dolphins. I see a team that lacks physicality and toughness. That I know there's no question about that, and I've mentioned that before. Lacking heart, players in contract years. I don't know if I'd go there necessarily. But if you have guys who are motivated solely by money, yeah, not a whole lot you can do. Oh, let's see. Hold on, here we go. With Jeffrey Appleton, with our offense, you can play quarterback. I'm actually better than you think I might be. No, I'm sorry. In my younger days, maybe. Now I'm a little bit too old for that. Shelby, Tua would get hurt right before the game. I'm planning on going to. They don't come to Seattle very often. No, man. Sorry, Shelby. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. But hopefully you're going there as a fan of the Dolphins, and more so than just one player. But I hear what you're saying. Marco again. Hey, Marco. I lied. One more question. Marco, you can have as the question as you want. I believe 2 games and fans are ready to jump ship. Do you think it's too early to cast judgment on this team? It's too early to jump ship, absolutely, without question. Is it too early to cast judgment? A little bit, except it was troubling what happened against Buffalo even before Tua's injury. Because, again, this was a big boy game. And if we're going to talk about the issues the Dolphins were facing, the Bills lost first of all, they lost their best current defensive player in training camp. That's Matt Milano. And then they lost their new best defensive player, Terrell Bernard, very, very early in the game. And they were playing without their best DB, Teron Johnson, in this game. So it's not like they didn't have, their issues as well. And they came to play big time. And this was a game where the Dolphins were out-coached, out-physicaled, out-executed in a big boy game, in a statement game where this was supposed to be a game where the Dolphins showed maybe this is a year they get it done. And instead you leave with all sorts of questions, even outside of what happened with Tua. So it was very troubling. Steven Jean-Baptiste, has Tua made significant improvements as a leader? Sure. Yeah, no, he has, but here's the thing, though. And again, this is where maybe I'm different from a lot of the media members in South Florida, for good or bad. It may not be your cup of tea. But I've been called a contrarian at times. I also tend not to follow like the easy storyline. Sure, Tua is more vocal, absolutely, without question. This is what happens when somebody gives you a major contract like that and makes that commitment financially with their words. You're our guy. Here's a 4-year extension with all this money. Obviously, we're rolling with you for the next 4 years. But having said that, if you heard all the narrative about the great halftime speech he gave, again, it's a quarterback lighting up the locker room at halftime. Not unheard of. And then the Dolphins came back, and a big deal was made of like the halftime speech spurred the Dolphins onto the win. Except it was 17-7 at halftime. Dolphins punted on their first 2 possessions of the second half after that stirring halftime speech. And then Jacksonville was on its way to going up 24-7 until Javon Holland punched the ball out of Travis Etienne's arms at the 4-yard line, and Kader Cole recovered in the end zone. So Dolphins won the game because they were able to make that big play, come back with a big throw to Tyreek Hill, a lot more than because of some halftime speech. So this is where, again, yes, he's made some steps as a leader, but that kind of stuff, a little bit overblown, if you're going to ask me. No, let me take that back. It's very overblown. Okay, sorry, I keep coming back with the same questions here. Let's go back over here. What do we got here? Humble legend, Titans beat us with Tua, though, LOL. Yeah, except the Titans Last year, we're coached by Mike Vrabel, who I would tell you is one of the best coaches in the NFL. Why, if he's such a great coach, why is he unemployed? I think because his personality doesn't necessarily mesh with everybody's. From my understanding and from everything I read, he was the runner-up. If the Chargers weren't able to get Jim Harbaugh, they would have gotten Mike Vrabel. The dude can coach. That's number one. Number two, they also had Derrick Henry, who they don't have anymore. If you've seen the Titans so far this year, they're 0-2. Not a good team. So yes, the Titans defeated the Dolphins last year in a game where the Dolphin offense was dysfunctional pretty much the whole night, even before they lost Connor Williams to that season-ending ACL. But this is not the same Tennessee team, and I'd be, pardon me, very surprised if the Dolphins did not beat Tennessee this year. Whoa. P-double, McDaniel coaching is the problem. We made the games closer than it should be. Of course, Tua ain't retiring because of the money. Thank you, Greer. We make the games closer than it should be. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that. I also think at times, to be honest with you, I think we overrate the Dolphins' talent. And the truth is, what the Dolphins have is like incredible speed on offense with dynamic playmakers with Hill, Waddle, Achane, Mostert when he's healthy. But on defense, they have a lot of big names who are very, very older players. Calais Campbell has been a great player, very possible, if not probable, Hall of Famer. But he's 38. Jordan Poyer, big name, not the same guy he was in his prime in Buffalo. Jalen Ramsey's 30, still a very good player, but he's not getting any younger. So I don't know if I'm necessarily buying McDaniel coaching being the problem. I think the whole makeup roster construction just puts so much on the speed and this skill position guys offensively that if it's not, it reduces the margin for error. If everything is not operating very, very sharply, you don't have the physicality to go back to, and that makes a difference. But it's not just the Dolphins who are having problems out of the gate. Cincinnati's 0-2, and that's a very good team. Baltimore's 0-2, and they're a pretty good team. So maybe we can take some solace in that a little bit. Brandon G, thank you very much for the contribution. No question, no comment, Brandon. Marco, again, you lied again. My worry, even if Tua comes back quick, is losing two O-linemen. Our backups looked horrible, and Finn's brass seems to always think we are fine at O-line. Yep. And not only that, that's a really bad look on Chris Greer when he's basically mocking the media for expressing concern about the offensive line. And the problem with Teron Armstead getting hurt, and I hate it because I love Teron Armstead. He's, as a player and as a dude, I mean, he's just a gem of a human being. Problem is, when you sign him, that was his injury history. He's never played one full season in the NFL. And here we go again. And Kendall Lamb is a solid backup, but he's a backup. Patrick Paul, do we really want to see if he's ready yet? I'm not sure. And I'm not basing what we saw in the preseason, because he had one outing that was against the Washington. I think it was against Washington where it was rough. And he had a couple of more outings that were better. But again, preseason, regular season, not the same thing. So I would be hesitant to put him in the starting lineup. That's a big loss. Hopefully he's not out for very long. Robert Jones, the left guard, is the other player who was injured. Don't know the severity of it. He didn't come back. Lester Cotton's the backup there. I don't think either one of those are necessarily grade A players. So but yeah, the Dolphins they decided once they made the move to let Robert Hunt go, and no issues with that. $20 million for a right guard is an insane amount of money, unless you're talking about a difference-making guard, i.e. Quentin Nelson in his prime, Zach Martin in his prime. You don't pay that kind of money. You just flat out don't. But for the Dolphins to decide, okay, we're good with what we have, yeah, it certainly can be argued that it was dicey. Okay, we're going to go back over here. Let's see what we got. Marco, I think we have bigger issues than quarterback before Tua was injured. We can hardly move the ball. Well, they moved it. They also had like a couple of. I mean, on that drive, they drove all the way. I mean, when Tua was injured, it was the first and goal at the 7. They also had the drive that ended with that reached midfield and ended with the 4th down sack. So no, it was a rough night. It was without question, it was a rough night. They say, will we address the O-line in your opinion? It's obviously why we lose to Buffalo and winning teams. I don't know how you can address it right now. I would hope they're going to address it in the offseason and the draft, except that's just not their MO. When we're talking about the interior of the offensive line, the last couple of years, they did draft Robert Hunt in the 2nd round in 2020. And then again, actually, they did draft Liam Eichenberg in the 2nd round in 2021. The last 3 years, they also haven't had a ton of picks. And it seemed to scream in the offseason that they need to do something about their offensive line. They decided not to. So not necessarily sure it's going to happen. Armando, do you trust Greer to find the QB? Again, I think they're going to go with Skyler and somebody else to back him up. So I don't. Do I trust him to find a QB? I don't know. I don't know. I don't trust him to find an interior offensive lineman. Oops, sorry. Oh, Richard, that's harsh. To me, it doesn't matter whether Tua is injury prone or not. The issue is that he sucks, period. No, he doesn't suck. Sorry. And Richard, this is coming from somebody who has pushed back whenever I find the hyperbole thrown in his direction to be a little over the top. Got into arguments and into the, into it with some Tua fans, but no, I'm sorry, I don't believe he does not. He far from sucks. I don't think he's a lead, but he doesn't suck. Elvis Garcia. So basically, season's over. No, flat out no. Bob Hogan, so much for the bully mentality. Yeah, and this is a perfect example, another lesson into. And I think I've made this point of like, there's a whole lot of things you're going to hear in training camp, and that happens in every city about how this year is going to be different. This is going to be the year we're going to change things. For many years, we heard about how this was going to be the year that they're going to go fast tempo on offense. It would be the same thing. This summer is going to be being the bullies on, being bullies. Not happening. Best roster we've ever had. And for that last one, I always chuckle. What else are they going to say? Is anybody really going to say in training camp, you know what? I think last year we had a better roster, but we're going to give it a shot with what we have. So no. So be careful when you hear like that kind of talk. Just always take it with a grain of salt. It's great to hear. I mean, you'd rather hear that than hear, oh, God, I hope we can win 5 games. But it's always with the notion of let's see how things play out in the regular season before we start making those kind of judgments. Sal Contrino, would you be surprised if we lose every game with Skyler? That's very much so. Don Shula 73. Poop, was Omar vindicated on his theory that the Mike White pickup may have given the Bills an edge Thursday night? No. Do you honestly think that the Bills, what the Dolphins were trying to throw at the Bills, is anything that they were not expecting based on film from the last couple of years? Come on, gang. Seriously? Edwin Robles, if Tua comes back, he should wear the Guardian helmet he didn't want to use. That's an excellent point. Whether that's going to happen, I don't know, but absolutely it's an excellent point. Johnny Rotten, I know Greer has final say, but is he getting his info from the scouts or himself? Fire the scouts, LOL. Johnny, actually, I think the final say, and the Dolphins have been very adamant about saying this, is a collaborative effort. The info first comes from the scouts, and Greer does some scouting. Then it's disseminated with the coaches, and usually they'll come up with a consensus. I think if Mike McDaniel expresses a strong desire to Chris Greer, more often than not, Chris Greer is going to be like, you got it. So technically, Chris Greer does have final say, but it's very collaborative. De Jose El Oliver totally ruined that game. You're not wrong. That dude can play. He was a man crush of mine when he came out of the University of Houston. Took him a while to get going, but yeah, that dude's a player. PC Canali, Skyler will be good. Watch. That would work for me. Teddy, good evening, Poop. What does Skyler need to do at the minimum to not lose/win the game? Don't turn the ball over. If you got somebody wide open, especially downfield, make the throw. Not asking you, don't play hero ball. Don't try to squeeze a pass between three defenders and have it picked off. Simple as that. This is where, again, the other parts of the team have to pick up. The defense has to pick up, has to come up with some takeaways and play strong defense. I hope the Dolphins still keep calling all those quick screens, quick throws outside to Tyreek, to Waddle, the jet sweeps, those shovel passes, all of that. Don't change the playbook. Simple as that. Okay, let's go back here. Steven Jean-Baptiste. Thank you very much for the contribution. Tua needs to wear a guardian cap also, with Tua probably out until after bye week with our tough December schedule. You think we make the playoffs? That's too early to answer those questions. First of all, I don't know if he's going to be out until the bye week. Under that assumption, I don't know. I don't know. The reason why I don't know, because you don't know what's going to happen around the AFC. It's not going to be easy. I don't think it's a slam dunk they make the playoffs. I didn't think it was a slam dunk they were going to make the playoffs to begin with. So I certainly don't think it is now. And who knows? Maybe down the stretch, some of those last six opponents that on paper look so difficult early on, or when the schedule came out, might not be so difficult. Cleveland doesn't look a very good team. They beat Jacksonville today, but they don't look particularly impressive. What will they be in week 17? We don't know. Marco, you keep lying, Marco, but I don't mind it. Go ahead. I appreciate it again. After 4 weeks and OBJ returns, do you see the freeing up coverage on Waddle and Hill and hopefully opening up this pass game more? No, because unless OBJ proves he can do a lot of damage down the field, I don't see why if you're an opposing defensive coordinator or head coach specializing in defense, why you let Tyreek and Waddle beat you on one play. You make the Dolphins drive down the field in a long drive where you hope they make a mistake at some point. And I don't know if that's a lesson that teams learned from week one, when Jacksonville basically played very well on defense and kind of stifled the Dolphin offense, except they gave up 2 massive plays. So, Don Shula 73, Poop, does it appear that McDaniel is still getting his play calls in a bit late during game day? You know what? I haven't noticed that. And as I watch games around, like, again, I watched NFL Red Zone today. I saw that in a couple of places. I haven't noticed it with McDaniel this year. Maybe I'm immune to it and it doesn't even register for me anymore. I don't know, but I haven't really noticed it. EJ, buddy, how are you? Beep boop. I have no idea what that means. Should Tua also wear a neck brace like linemen? No chance he does that, because then I think it would restrict his ability to maneuver around the field. I don't believe so. And even if he had a neck brace, wouldn't have protected him from the contact to the head that he got from DeMar Hamlin's chest. So not saying it's impossible. I don't particularly see it. Come on now. MTG, am I the only one that thinks we are the laughing stock of the NFL? I can't speak for anybody else, MTG, but yeah, I'm not in that group. Brandon G, what positions on offense do you feel the team should try to stay cheap at? Well, right guards, the guard position, there's certainly 2 of them. Again, unless you can find, you should invest if you find a difference maker at guard, and those guys are very few and far between. I think that running backs are a dime a dozen. And I say that while also acknowledging the Dolphins might have a special dude in Devon Achane, but he's also on his rookie contract. Once he gets 4 years of wear and tear on his body, let's see where he is before we talk about what his second contract's going to look like. But generally speaking, you can find running backs a lot of different places. Those are not that difficult to find. So those would be the spots. I think the Dolphins would probably tell you tight end also, because they just don't make a big use of the tight ends. But if you can get a stud like a George Kittle or a Travis Kelce, that kind of guy, or Dallas Goedert, or even Dalton Kincaid, yeah, it's worthwhile to invest in one. But the Dolphins, again, their whole theme is speed, and it's not necessarily what you get at tight end. Batson, Wyndham Skyler, if you're right about him, the Dolphins will be selecting high in the draft. I think more highly of the developmental QB. What developmental QB? You talking about Tim Boyle? Nope, sorry. Chuck Cole, David Long consistently is trying to fill the wrong gap. He's not trying to fill the wrong gap when he reads wrong, and he wasn't on that play. He also made a lot of plays. I think the dude actually played pretty well. That was one bad play. And even through the first 2 games, I actually think he's been playing pretty well. PC Canale, Patrick Paul must start at left tackle or left guard at minimum. No, he's not a left guard, period. Period, end of story. It's not like Laramie Tunsil. No, sorry. He will start at left tackle in 2025. That's my prediction here. P-double NFL players avoid Miami unless we overpay because of Greer. No, my NFL players do not avoid Miami. Dolphins do overpay, but the Dolphins also have the no state income tax as a major draw. They also have ridiculously impressive facilities with great support staff. Those are the factors that are involved. But no, nobody would avoid the Dolphins because of Chris Greer. No, these other factors come into play big time. Brandon G, thank you to Brandon G for the contribution. With the team struggles against winning teams, do you think it's more on players not executing game plans or McDaniel's game plans? Or how about the construction of the roster being flawed? This is not a team that's built. Again, and I asked Amazon did a conference call with their 4 former players who are reporters, and I hope you guys read the story on Miami Dolphins on SI. Andrew Whitworth, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Richard Sherman, and Tony Gonzalez. And I asked all 4 of them their level of confidence that the Dolphins could take the next step in 2024, or whether there was a concern that the way the team is built, for a track meet style of game, whether that would put a ceiling on what the team could accomplish. And Andrew Whitworth is the one who made a point that I've said before, that the game changes in the second half of the season, where the wide open spaces you see in September and October are just not there anymore. It's a different style of game. Everything compresses. It's more physical, and the Dolphins flat out are not roster constructed for that type of football. Now, having said that, is it impossible for them to win in those circumstances late in the season against playoff? No, but their margin for error is probably much smaller than other teams who are better constructed for those conditions. So that's unfortunately the deal there. Chris Bussin. Hey, Chris, buddy, how are you? Thank you very much for the contribution. Do you see any scenario where Chris Greer gets fired after the season? Chris, I would be shocked, to be honest with you. I think Chris Greer has a ton of equity with Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross, when he fired Brian Flores, talked about he wanted to have an organization where everybody worked well together. Chris Greer is the ultimate example of that. He's been with the Dolphins since 2000. Stephen Ross is very loyal to him. I would be shocked. And that was the same thing that I was asked this early before the season started about Mike McDaniel, whether he could be on the hot seat. And I said at the time, this was before his extension, I said, barring 5 and 12, where injuries are not a factor, there is no hot seat. It's not even lukewarm. It might as well be freezing. And I don't think Chris Greer is quite in that safe a position, but I don't see any scenario where I would be very surprised. Let me put it this way. Well, man, we already addressed this. Okay, we're about to wrap it up here. We're going about almost on an hour. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining me on this Sunday evening. After we're done here, I'm going to watch the end of this Chicago-Houston game. It's 10-3 Houston right now. Can't imagine it's going to be a very good game. I think Houston is a legit contender in the AFC. So is Buffalo. By the way, that team the Dolphins lost to, that's a pretty damn good Buffalo team. I'm not so sure it's not the best Buffalo team that they've had in a few years. I mean, they're very well constructed, and I think Josh Allen, if he plays smart and only does hero ball when he needs to do hero ball, that team is going to be a problem. Jets won today. I don't see them as being very problematic. I think it's a terribly impressive team. KC again just finds a way to win, but I think Houston, Buffalo right now, the two teams. Pittsburgh's going to be difficult to play the whole year. I just don't think I don't know how far you can go in the playoffs with Justin Fields as your quarterback. But their defense is absolutely legit, and they don't beat themselves. So let's see what else we got. Interesting. Easy is Skyler's number one receiver. He was he was in the preseason. You're absolutely right. That's a great point. It's an interesting take. I wonder if they have to elevate a wide receiver again because Malik Washington's still not ready, whether they would elevate Easy because of the chemistry he had with Skylar Thompson. Excellent point, Billy Batson. That deserves a heart, actually. Let me see if it's going to do it. There we go. That deserves a heart. Let's see. We got one more here. Marco again. Do we have better players than Dubose and Chosen? Yeah, and here's the thing about Grant Dubose is when the Dolphins claimed him, I called my Green Bay Packers on SI counterpart, Bill Huber, who basically unsolicited told me that guy's, there's something there. And he easily could have made the team, but the Packers wide receiver core was loaded where they couldn't keep 6, but they had 6 NFL players. And he's also a special teams core guy. Looks kind of raw at wide receiver. The interception that bounced off of him, throw a little bit behind him, didn't turn around quickly enough, wasn't able to make the catch and adjust to it. Robbie Chosen, I mean, he's a good veteran, but he hasn't been a factor for 3 or 4 years. And the Dolphins obviously, no, they don't have anybody else better than that. And that's an issue. They do, but River Cracraft's on IR. So after week 4, after the Tennessee game, maybe he comes back. That helps. And then Malik Washington, maybe the quad injury heals and he can come back and help. That could make a difference as well. But right now, no. This is what they have. Okay, let's see what we got here. Shelby, was there an explanation why Waddle and Hill weren't on the field on the first INT? I don't know about Waddle. Hill had just run a deep pattern. If you remember the play, this was a play where Tua tried to hit him deep. He was completely covered by Christian Benford, and it was an incomplete. And then Tyreek asked out after the play, guessing he was gassed after running that play. That's why he wasn't on. I cannot see what happened. I can't tell you what happened with Jalen Waddle there. What do we got here? Oh, guys, I hate the infighting in the chat here. Not cool. Not cool. What do we got here? Ant-Man, I've said it since Flores era. Miami needs a wall of an OL, and I would sacrifice weaponry for it. I would have considered putting Lamb or Paul at right tackle, moving AJ to OG to get the best 5 on the field. Here's the interesting thing I'm going to throw out here based off of your comment. The Dolphins went this route. If you remember in the 2021 draft, they had the 3rd overall pick, then it became 12, then it became 6. At 6, the Dolphins chose Jalen Waddle. Very, very hard to complain about that pick considering he's had 3 1,000-yard seasons and he's become a very good wide receiver. They also could have had Penei Sewell, who is basically right now the best player on the best offensive line in the NFL. At that point, I think you kind of make a philosophical decision, and the decision was there's going to be speed over physicality. Certainly safe wonder whether, in retrospect, the right move would not have been Penei Sewell and build a team from the trenches out, as opposed to the other way around. And then that was put in overdrive the next offseason when the Dolphins were able to make the trade for Tyreek Hill, which, again, looking at it just microscopically is difficult to argue against, considering what he's done with the Dolphins, except in the big picture, it's not gotten them anywhere in terms of winning a playoff game. And then in 2020, the Dolphins did address the offensive line. They took Austin Jackson with the 18th overall pick, but they got the 5th offensive lineman in that draft. When they had the 5th overall pick, they took Tua at 5. And again, based on what our former co-host Omar has said, Brian Flores' take would have been, or preference would have been, to take an offensive tackle at 5, and then maybe Jordan Love at 18, or maybe even later in the first round. And it should be pointed out that we don't know exactly which offensive lineman would have been the choice at 5 had that been the call, because Mekhi Becton flamed out with the Jets. He's now with the Eagles. So it wasn't like everyone panned out. Tristan Wirfs has become a complete stud. Jedrick Wills has had his moments with Cleveland. And I'm trying to remember 1, 2, 3. There was another offensive lineman who escapes me right now, and I can't remember. And because I can't remember, that means I'm getting tired, and it's probably time to call it a night. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Again, thanks everyone for watching, for joining me. I'll be back Monday after the Dolphins practice, and we hear what Mike McDaniel has to say. Maybe we'll have a 2 update, but we'll be here to wrap it all up. Again, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and this is what I have to say for everybody who joined. This is my heart emoji, my little trick I do on my MacBook Pro. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.